We've been telling employees for the last couple of decades, well, first it's like digital transformation's coming for you. Then it's the robots are coming for you. Now it's like AI's coming for you. So if you tell an employee today, hey, don't worry about your job. We're not going to let you go. They're going to be like, yeah, you can't promise that. I've been listening to you for the last few decades. What you can do is you can promise something bigger, which is offer career security. I'm going to make you better for an uncertain future. And I don't know if a big customer is going to cancel an order or whether we're going to have a competitor really take away some of our business. I can't promise you job security. I can promise you something bigger, career security. And so that means I want to invest. The good news is you want to do that as an organization because you want your people to continue to grow.
This is Dr. Rob Harder with the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast, making your world better. What does it take to be an effective nonprofit leader today? What are the biggest challenges? What are the biggest obstacles? How should nonprofits fundraise in an economy that is constantly changing? All of these reasons combined led me to start this show. And it's my hope that through this series, people can learn not only what it takes to be an effective nonprofit organization, but to hear from effective leaders who are successfully making a positive impact in their communities. We hope you enjoy this show, as together we hear how they are making their world better.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast with Rob Harder. I'm Lena LaRue, based currently in Mexico, and I'm a listener just like you who cares about the nonprofit world and the people leading it. If you're looking to learn and grow as a nonprofit leader, you're in the right place. Thanks for listening. Now, here's Rob.
Welcome back, everybody, to the show. I'm Rob Harder, your host. So I want to first give a shout out to all my listeners in Ireland. Different times I'll get these different reports about where people are listening to this podcast. And I saw that there's a lot of listeners in Ireland. So I just want to say thank you for all those. Shout out to those in Ireland. It's ironic. I do have some Irish roots. Well, that's where I can trace part of my family is from Ireland. So again, shout out to all of you who are listening in Ireland. If you've got leaders that you would like to get on the show that are prominent leaders perhaps in Ireland, please send me an email. Give me a shout out and let me know, hey, you should interview this person because they're really making a difference in our country when it comes to various aspects of the nonprofit or social impact sphere. Would love to receive that email and find out who those leaders are. Okay, so today, this is a really important topic today because this, I think, may change how you lead your organization when it comes to the issue of both recruitment and retention. Now, let me start by giving this phrase, or this term, I should say, that if you haven't heard of this term, you need to acquaint yourself with this term. It's called the WorkQuake. This refers to our current seismic shift in the employer-employee relationship, really driven by the rapid technology change that we're seeing in our culture today. Now, this is primarily in the American context, but this actually is happening all around the world. I'm sure it's happening in Ireland. It's due to, again, technology, the change in technology, AI, frequent career changes, the ever-changing worker expectations when it comes to loyalty, meaning, and flexibility with one's job. Now, this really became a trend after COVID, but it really continues to this day. So you as a leader, you need to be aware of how you can respond to this trend because, for example, you're here with my guest today, that in the business world, the average tenure for a new staff person, this is for businesses, is 2.5 years. I believe, and I don't have any current stats on this, but I believe in the nonprofit world, it's even less. So you're talking a very short time when it comes to like how long are people going to stay on average with your company or organization. So the idea would be, among other things, is to really redesign your organization and redesign your whole onboarding and recruiting process with a short cycle talent relationship model is how it's being described. I'll say that again, it's a short cycle talent relationship model rather than counting on long-term stability for those you're hiring for your company or your organization. Because the fact is, people are just not sticking around. Now, there's certain things you can do to help extend retention. In fact, my guest is going to talk about that. But there is a lot around this issue of the WorkQuake that we're living through. And again, this primarily really began to come to an inflection point after COVID. So who's my guest today? My guest is Steve Cadigan, and he's known, among other things, for being the Chief Human Resource Officer at LinkedIn, the very first one. And he was at LinkedIn when it grew from 400 staff to 4,000 staff in less than 4 years. So he's had a lot of experience with explosive growth. He was in this culture of Silicon Valley where it's one of the most competitive environments to hire people, right? Think about all the companies that are around him that are vying for that same talent, whether it be Facebook, Facebook or Google, YouTube, you name it. He was in the midst of that, able to hire a bunch of people and really scale LinkedIn during that time. So he has now moved on to be a coach and a consultant, and he's author of the book WorkQuake. And we're going to talk all about what does this really mean for you and I as leaders of organizations when it comes to whether it be hiring, recruiting, and certainly when it comes to retention. It really is an interesting conversation. You're going to learn a lot of things. So as always, love having you tuning in. And once again, thank you to all my listeners in Ireland. So glad you're tuning in today. All right, on to my interview with Steve. This podcast is sponsored by DonorBox. DonorBox, helping you help others with the best donation forms in the business. Well, welcome back to the show. I've got Steve Cadigan here in the studio. Steve, thanks so much for taking time to be on the show today.
Excited to be here, Rob.
Absolutely. Well, I always like to start each episode giving my guests an opportunity to talk a little bit about their story, their own journey, whatever you want to share, kind of leading up to the point where we're definitely going to talk about WorkQuake, a lot of your work with both businesses and nonprofit organizations. But just tell us a bit of your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Sure. Just a bit of my background. Born in America, raised in South Africa. And then at the age of 7, we were sort of told by the South African government, you need to leave. So we went back to America, sort of grew up from there in Connecticut on the East Coast. Went to high school, went to college there, moved to California. As soon as I graduated, for really clear, a lot of reasons, we make big decisions in life. I was in love with someone who was in California. So followed that to the West Coast. And California's pretty much been my home for the last 40 years or so, except I had 2 years in Singapore and 4 years in Western Canada as part of my career journey. I've been in the whole universe of talent, people, human resources. I love it. I think it's the greatest art form in the world, trying to figure out how to, get people to do something greater together. I just love it. I think my love stems from my joy of sports. I love watching sports. Right now, as we're recording this, it's the middle of, what I call just heaven, March Madness. Basketball. Yeah. I'm a huge basketball fan and super fun for me. But I love seeing how people handle circumstances and different circumstances, playing from behind, winning, losing, being the focal point of the offense, moving to not being the focal point of the offense, and how do people respond to that? And that joy is really parlayed well into the working world. And so my last regular full-time job, I was the first chief HR officer for LinkedIn for period of massive growth. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then I left there after 4 years that felt like 20 and started doing my own thing. I started to help businesses, leaders, companies, boards, industries, and in some cases countries build what I call more compelling talent strategies. And that's what I do today. Published a book right after the pandemic called WorkQuake, and really trying to build a better future work for employers and employees. So it's a little bit of my story.
No, well, thanks for sharing that story. Always fun just to get a little bit of background on people and love. I share that love for March Madness and basketball. And I know you've got a lot of good stories now. When UConn beat Duke, they were pretty much out of that game and they still won at the very end. So I'm sure that's one of those you're going to share that story, because what an incredible story of never giving up, right?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, okay, let's talk about that. Yeah, because I love the fact you've got a lot of experience, and that LinkedIn experience. Certainly want to hear about that. Just massive growth in a short amount of time. But I also want to talk about WorkQuake, because I think you're right. In your book, you really touched on some things that now is shaping businesses, maybe even countries, just in terms of how people view work, how they experience work, issues with retention, recruitment, all of those things are kind of weaved in there. So talk a bit about your book. For my listeners who maybe haven't read it yet or not familiar, how do you define WorkQuake, and what does it primarily refer to? Like, what prompted you to write the book?
Sure. I think the book really came from a career of seeing so much that seemed to be broken in the world of work, that increasingly I saw employers and employees be increasingly dissatisfied with how things were going. And I think the real genesis for me was that the architecture of work, I was increasingly becoming aware, was just not built for the pace of change that we're seeing right now. For example, some of the biggest things that we're seeing are the need for new skills faster than any time in history. We're seeing an increase in turnover. People are staying in companies for shorter periods than ever before. And what's interesting is companies were not built to upskill people fast. Companies were built to keep people a long time, and neither of those are being delivered upon right now. And nobody thinks that we're going to bridge the skill gap anytime soon, because technology and new technologies are outpacing our capacity to build the skills to allow people to leverage that. And Nobody believes that, oh, in 5 years, people are going to stay in their jobs a lot longer. Everyone believes that in a more transparent marketplace for opportunity, people are going to continue to move at the pace we're seeing right now. And the best case is we plateau. And right now in the United States, we have in the demographic 20 to 35 years old, the median tenure in a company is 2.5 years. Think about that.
Oh, wow.
And think about this, most benefit plans in every company are built around the longer you stay, more vacation you get, the longer you stay, more promotion opportunities. And none of that stuff is believed to be achievable anymore. So why do we have all these broken models? So that was really the genesis for me to say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I know the model's broken. Let's start with acknowledging we've got a problem and work together to try to fix it.
Yeah, boy, so right on that. 2.5 years. Yeah, think about, like, I was thinking about a lot of things like benefit packages. I think about like people investing in your team so that they're here for 5, maybe 10 years or more. 2.5 years, that goes fast. That goes really quickly. So, okay, so you talk a lot about doing the old way of working was wiped out by this WorkQuake. What should leaders be doing now, not just to rebuild, but to fundamentally reinvent how we approach talent and coaching them?
The world's changing so fast that if you go, read my book from cover to cover, I don't even know if I mentioned the word artificial intelligence in the book. And this is 2021, And so as proud as I am of the book and everything that I was calling around what was probably going to happen has come true. And I still think it's super, super current right now and still valuable. And I have organizations that have built their whole people strategy around the principles of the book. But my advice is pretty uncomfortable for leaders right now. Listen, you need to have an AI philosophy, okay? You need to know where you stand and the company stands with AI. Are you going to use it to make people more productive and try to get them out of a job and replace them? Or are you going to use it to be a superpower and to be additive for their career journey? And, there's two camps that I see people mostly falling in. And it's usually let's use AI to replace people because they're, I love my business except for the people kind of approach. And I think that's a real missed opportunity because if you can find a way to replace what someone's doing in part, why not unleash them on something new, something bigger, something, amazing, rather than, okay, we don't need them anymore. It's just such a limiting perspective, right? So that's number one. Number two, in an era of massive change and a need for new skills fast than any time in history, I think we're going to increasingly need to start hiring people based on what they can learn, not just what they know. Like, I know your job's going to change. We have a joke in human resources, like the value and accuracy of a job description is about as long as it takes for you to hit print and pick it up off the printer, because now the job's already different. And yet we still are hiring for yesterday. We're not hiring for tomorrow. Like, I know it's going to change. So Rob, I need to know that you can grow, that you're not stuck in your ways, that you're curious. And that's a big part of what I think, leaders need to get ready for, because it's uncomfortable because I want to know you can do it. But I also know your job's going to change. So I need to build a new profile of what I'm recruiting for. Those are probably two big ones that I'd like to suggest for leaders.
That's so helpful. I love that. And you talked about more employees are more loyal to learning than to the organizations. How is that reshaping the employer-employee compact, if you will, or contract, if you want to call it that? And how should leaders respond? Because I think there's this new generation that's coming out is basically compensation is not always the most important thing. What they're looking for culture, and they're looking to grow personally. And so going back to that whole thing about organizations are not maybe as loyal to that as much as what are they growing? How are they growing as individuals? So how does that change how you lead them, how you recruit them, how you retain them?
Yeah, I think we've been telling employees for the last couple of decades, well, first it's like digital transformation's coming for you. Then it's the robots are coming for you. Now it's like AI is coming for you. So if you tell an employee today, hey, don't worry about your job, we're not going to let you go, they're going to be like, yeah, you can't promise that. I've been listening to you for the last few decades. What you can do is you can promise something bigger, which is offer career security. I'm going to make you better for an uncertain future. And I don't know if a big customer is going to cancel an order or whether we're going to have a competitor really take away some of our business. I can't promise you job security. I can promise you something bigger, career security. And so that means I want to invest in you. Now, the good news is you want to do that as an organization because you want your people to continue to grow. And I teach in schools around the world. And I have to tell you, they're increasingly just turned off by getting ghosted, getting all these companies that are using AI to sort of filter them out. And they're like, if the first step of my career ladder is awful, what makes me think that going in there and working is going to be better, and we've got people, we've got a real aware generation around, hey, I want to go and make a difference, but I can't promise you I'm going to stay there forever because there's a career candidate store for me out there and I can see more opportunities. So that's why I say promise growth. And that, I can speak from experience. When we were building LinkedIn in the shadows of Google, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, they could outpay us, outbenefit us, outwork environment us, outperk us. All I could say was, listen, yes, you can go there and make more money if that's important to you right now. But what we're solving is something that really matters, helping people find their dream job. And I promise you that I will do everything I can to make this the most enriching growth experience of your career. And did we hit it all the time? No, we didn't. But I can proudly say that everyone that I hired on my team who said the reason they wanted to come was because they want my job or they want to be a head of HR, I can say every single person that said that to me is in that role today. I believe that I delivered on that. And I think that's what my peers, my fellow executives at LinkedIn were able to do. And that's a different compact. Most leaders say, come here and stay here. And what we found in technology in a very competitive landscape for talent is come here, I'll make you better. And if you leave, maybe you'll come back. If you leave, maybe you refer your friends. That I'm creating a bigger set of angels in the universe that are going to benefit me in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
So it sounds like you really, I like that approach. It sounds like you created this compelling purpose, number one, but also you're really clear that it was not just about the company. You were really committed to that person to help them grow and wherever that leads them, even if it's out of your company. And that seemed to really resonate with the people you hired.
Yeah, think about this, Rob, and listeners. We have more new industries. We have more new, therefore, career choices for people than any time in history. We have more ways that you can earn a living not working for someone else, with whether you want to drive an Uber or whether you want to publish YouTubes at scale or sell on a TikTok shop. You don't have to work. There's so many choices. So if you're an employer and you're not clear on why someone should work for you, you're in trouble because someone's telling a better story than you are, or someone's delivering a better story. I mean, it is really, really important. Last week I was in Lisbon and I teach a workshop there once a quarter for entrepreneurs. And I say, well, hey, let's do an exercise. Why would someone want to work for you? And usually, and this is everywhere I've ever taught this course, this is usually the response, because we like people, because we're nice, because we have a good product, we're going to make a lot of money, we got a good board, good leadership, and we have beer on Fridays. And I usually say, hey, you know what I just heard? Blah, 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 what everyone else says, blah, blah, beer Fridays. That's all I heard because it all sounds the same.
That's awesome. Right.
And when you're building LinkedIn, for example, and Google's making more in a day than you make in a year, and they've got shiny objects everywhere, I got to be really clear. Hey, the problem we're solving is helping people find their dream job. Does that resonate for you? Does that get you excited? Or do you want to go over there to Facebook and help develop children's short attention span capability and proliferate fake news? I don't know. What do you want to do? Like, I believe what we're doing. And then when you really want to get aggro, and we got really aggressive, we would say why we're great and what the others are offering. Oh, you want to be Google engineer number 17,000 and clean the trophies of everyone else before you? Or do you want to come here and put your fingerprints on our code? I don't know. What do you want to do here? And what we knew is the assets we have were earlier stage than all those other companies, so you can make a bigger difference and put a bigger footprint. The problem we're solving, we felt, was higher and more important than all the other companies we were competing against. So we used those assets, right? And we didn't talk about, hey, we have crappy buildings and dookie free lunch and all kinds of other stuff. There's no parking here. Good luck. We didn't talk about those, but we talked about what we did have, right? And that's what I would say to, back to the meta point. If you don't have a real compelling reason why people should work for you, you're going to be in trouble because someone's selling something more sexy and more fancy that's going to take your employees or your candidates' eyes a different direction. So really double down on that.
I love that. And there's no doubt about it. Having a compelling purpose, whether again, be a business or a nonprofit. Nonprofits typically are already kind of driven by a mission that attracts people, right? And often they may be willing to get paid a little less than they would in the for-profit world. But either way, it doesn't matter. You need to have a compelling purpose. You just really described that beautifully. Okay, so another thing that you already kind of touched on this a bit, but there's no doubt that there's more opportunities that have been created because of AI, hybrid work, remote work, gig work that is becoming, just commonplace place now. And I think right after you wrote your book, that became just really exploded in popularity. Besides kind of the obvious disruptions, what are the under the radar talent trends that you're seeing that are really defining these last 5 and even up to in the next 5 years, so 10 years, in terms of that impact, the AI, the gig work, all those different opportunities now for people where there's more options to have maybe multiple jobs, work for multiple people. Tell us about what you found with that.
Yeah, this notion of the proliferation of gig economy, it resonates for me. However, there's enormous inertia that's going to block that from being realized at scale. And in America, it's largely driven by the cost of health insurance and your inability to buy a home easily and get a mortgage if you don't have a corporate paycheck, right? So the whole system in most first world nation is built around you have a job for an employer, right? Show me your pay stub so that I know you're legit and you're a safe bet for me to give you a loan. And for insurance, it's so expensive in the United States. And so that's a real limiter. In other countries, there's similar reasons, but the legislation's all written for you have a job working for someone else, right? And so I think we're going to see more people, to your point, I do believe we'll see more people have a portfolio of opportunities. But we still have a big percentage of leaders who are very concerned about intellectual property ownership and don't want your eyeballs somewhere else and don't want your attention off of me. You know what I'm saying? So I think that we're a generation or two away from that really getting unlocked. And I have no faith that our politicians are going to figure out the healthcare dilemma that we have in this country anytime soon. And I'll tell you, as an independent business person, it's the biggest expense I have by a mile. And I'm paying for get hit by a bus insurance, and
Right,
that's still
exactly.
expensive, I don't have
right.
really great care. So that's a real bummer. But I think that the other big trend is that, listen, we have an enormous amount of new opportunities for people out there. And similar to what I was saying a few minutes ago, you really need to present new challenges for people. So if people are really wanting to grow and you want them to grow, what we're going to have to do is re-engineer a job. And this is really hard for some people because it is hard to implement. We're going to have to implement a lot of growth in the job. So when I say it's all about growth and learning, I'm not talking about bringing teachers in and having seminars and going to classes. No, I'm talking about, hey, Rob, here's a new project. Here's a new assignment. Here's a new virtual team. I need you to take this on because I think you're going to like it. And also I want to see if you can grow and develop. And what's really great, one of the coolest features about AI that I'm seeing start to grow is the raising awareness through AI of what you might learn fast. Rob, I can see your profile. I can see your pedigree, where you went to school, languages you speak, countries you've lived in, industries you played in. And people with your profile seem to really gravitate well towards this new soft skill, this new hard skill. So I think that's something that, you might really like and you might be really good at. And that I think is increasingly going to be, we're going to have more organizations need to sort of assess your anatomy of skills and what's possible for you. Because if I can do that, it takes the pressure off of me having to go recruit in the open market, which is very expensive and time consuming, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, there's no doubt. I mean, I can only imagine how difficult that was to really scale at LinkedIn from, what you said, 400 to 4,000. I'm sure there were some mistakes made along the way. But as you look back at that time and also then sounds like you work with all different kinds of companies and organizations, what are you seeing as some of the biggest mistakes now when people are trying to scale that you've learned from the past or you're just seeing right in front of your eyes because of this post-WorkQuake world that we live in now?
Yeah, the biggest mistakes are assuming with technology I can shortcut something that, probably can't be shortcut with technology. So for example, building trust, or communicating. Oh, I'm just going to use this new tool, Slack, fill in the blank, cool new thing to give you more impossible amounts of information to consume, and, in this era of rapid change and newness, and we've got the most disengaged workforce and the most disengaged leadership that we've ever had since Gallup's been measuring it. The most. And leaders have come in December. Gallup published their survey on global leaders, not just US, the lowest score ever. They're just being asked to do impossible things, make your team
what's
work
causing
harder,
that in your mind?
I think it's a volume issue. It's a volume and complexity issue. People aren't staying as long. The architecture of work wasn't built for that. We've got new challenges to adopt AI, figure this out. We've got more because of technology, your competition can move faster than ever before, right? Companies can be built really quickly with really low costs compared to last week. And, I remember sitting in the LinkedIn boardroom, and I remember the technical founders were having a conversation. This is part of the joy of being around really, really smart people. They're saying, if we built this company today, and we're about 10 years old at the time, they said, if we were to build this company today, it would take a fraction of the time and a fraction of the investment. And that's, when you look at what AI is capable of doing right now, that's causing a lot of fear among leaders, right? And a lot of impossible, assignments that they're being tasked to do. So, and we've got a very weary workforce right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that the disengagement is so high, both for staff as well as the executives. Okay, you framed this idea, this shift from retain the employee to retain the relationship in response to this WorkQuake thing that we're going through. What does that actually look like, though, in practice? It sounds good. And then what's the upside or even the risk of thinking this way?
So the trend in the last 5-10 years in North America and developed countries is people are just not staying as long. So as I said earlier, if you ask any leader, hey, do you think that's going to continue? You think we're going to hit a bottom of the parabola and people are going to start staying longer? People say no. I said, okay. So if you think you can change that curve, you go about you. But trying to get people to stay longer, I call is playing defense. And if you accept people are going to stay shorter, now you can play offense. Okay, I can't have a job that takes 5 years for someone to learn how to do. Let me re-engineer this job so it only takes 6 months. Now I may need to hire 2 people, but I'm going to have less downtime because I'm not going to lose someone after 3 years. Go, oh my gosh, I have to start over. And that really jacks up. Second thing is, if people are going to leave sooner, then you need to have a lot of cross-training. You need to have a lot of knowledge sharing, more than you've ever had before. Spotify did something really amazing a few years ago when they had a high amount of turnover, particularly among Gen Z workers, as they said, we're going to mandate you can only be in your job for 2 years. You have to move to a different role. Now, not everyone, and that's a business that didn't require deep PhDs in most of the roles, right? So you didn't have to have super, super deep domain experts, and you are able to move people around. And it turns out when you put someone in a new opportunity, they get energy, they get excited, a new challenge. And I put this to a lot of leaders out there, like, hey, when have you done your best work and when have you been most excited? When you've been in the same job 5 years or when you took on something new and different? So let's design to unlock that energy, design to make that happen. Oh, and when you do that, when you do what Spotify did, that's an insurance policy. If someone leaves, hey, Rob was in that job last year. Let's ask him to pinch hit while we recruit or something like that. You follow me? So, and then the third big one is a really big one, which is, I'm sorry to hurt your feelings if you went to the Tony Soprano School of HR, which is you quit, you're dead to me, is you form alumni communities.
Right.
Alumni
Okay.
communities, like, keep in touch. You know how much what the budget is for an alumni community? Zero. Costs you nothing. You just send out a note once a quarter, once a month. Hey, we're gonna have a breakfast. We're gonna have a virtual talk. Steve, you left LinkedIn, and they've actually done this to me. Say, hey, would you come in and host a conversation around what you did with your career after you left LinkedIn? We've got a bunch of people who are thinking of leaving. They've been here a number of years. Talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Hey, would you mentor one of our executives? She's thinking of making a pivot, or she's the new head of HR. Would you just be an angel for her? Like, that makes me feel wanted. That makes me feel like I want to be a value for that company for the rest of my life. And most organizations I talk to that are struggling, I talked to so many hospitals in America in the last 2 years, and they've got massive nurse turnover. I said, so are you talking to the nurses? And they look at me like, why would we do that? They divorced us. They don't think we're sexy. We don't want to call, you're not sexy. We're not, you're not sexy, And so it's such a miss, like, maybe they've been there for a month and they don't like it. Just check in with them. They might want to come back, And so that we have to do that, right? And we have to, I think, and plus everyone's got a cell phone these days, and that is a public relations device. You want people to have good experiences. And so, and it turns out that alumni communities are really, really good investments. So those are things that can sort of help reframe the thinking around this. Like, that's how you play offense. And having played in the most competitive market for talent on the planet, Silicon Valley, I'm telling you that stuff, it does pay dividends if you can pull it off.
I mean, it makes sense. Honestly, I love the kind of the concept of creating loyalty by actually being open-handed with former staff as well as current staff. Like to bring a former staff member like you in and talk to people that are thinking about leaving, that takes tremendous security in your leadership, number one. But also, it's ironic because it reverses someone's logic, perhaps, because actually it's created more loyalty for you. And my guess is even for the people that, even if say they leave, there's going to be some kind of loyalty connection to LinkedIn because they allowed their staff to kind of grow and nurture and find their own path. I think that's brilliant, actually. I think the alumni approach is really
Google
smart.
took this to a whole nother level. I don't know if they still do it, but back when I was at LinkedIn, I remember my leaders saying, "Hey, we want to go hire a senior person from Google to do some big engineering job. Why don't you go talk to a search firm?" So call a friend of a friend of a friend. Find the executive recruiter from Egon Zehnder whose desk is inside of Google. And I said, "Hey, we'd love to hire some top talent from Google." And she goes, "I'd love to help you." And I go, "Isn't that unethical? Like they're your client. You're sitting in their campus. You're allowed to give me." She goes, "No, they want me to. They want me to place their people in other organizations." I mean, that is like, whoa, so mature. And it's like, hey, that's we care about you and your career. And if this isn't the right place, so we borrowed on that and we riffed on it a little bit. And we used to say in the interview at LinkedIn, "What do you want to do when you leave here?" And people are just shocked. They're like, "Wait,
I
we're doing
bet
an
you
exit."
just laid it out there.
Yeah.
Right. Oh,
Like,
wow. Yeah.
they're like, "Wait, you're doing my exit interview? I haven't got the job offer yet." Well, like, well, listen, this
Right.
is Silicon Valley. We know you're probably going to stay here less than 2 years. And that's what software engineers, it's like 1.8 years. And so we know you're not going to be here. So where do you want to go so we can make sure that we're optimizing your time here to get you wherever that is? And they're just like, whoa, now we're having a real conversation, right? And that was really inspirational. But you're right. Traditional leaders would be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why would we do that?
Yeah, it goes against all that competitive spirit, right? That often happens in these same companies, right? So I'm really impressed, actually, and surprised in a good way. Like that's very counterintuitive of what I think most people think when it comes to these companies, particularly Silicon Valley. We'll be right back. Are you looking for an easy and effective way to boost your nonprofit's donations? Well, look no further than DonorBox, the online fundraising platform that streamlines your fundraising efforts, maximizes donations, and simplifies giving for your supporters. With DonorBox, you can create beautiful donation forms, accept digital wallet payments, track donations, and send auto receipts. And the best part? There are no setup or monthly fees and no long-term contracts required. So what are you waiting for? Visit donorbox.org today to get started. That is www.donorbox.org. Well, okay, for a lot of my listeners, I'd say the majority of what I can tell, the majority of my listeners are in some kind of nonprofit or social impact organization. And so budgets are a little tighter, a little smaller typically. So you really have to be careful. You really have to make sure every hire counts, right? Because you don't have as much margin perhaps as the for-profit company across the street. What would you say to HR directors of nonprofit organizations when you talk about the WorkQuake? Is there anything else maybe unique to a mission-driven organization, again, that has a few less resources and has to be a little bit more intentional with their hiring process?
Yeah, first, and I should have said this up front, Rob, I am the product of two nonprofit leaders. My dad's a minister. My mom ran low-income child care centers in my hometown in Danbury, Connecticut for years. And they've been givers and nonprofit leaders for their whole lives. And so it's in my DNA, it's in my bones. In fact, I have a whole chapter of WorkQuake around, I think there's an enormous, if I'm sitting at in a fireside chat with a bunch of HR leaders and nonprofits, say, listen, you've never had a better opportunity than you have right now. You got so many people in career transitions that are looking for something different, to plug into meaning, to plug into making a difference than ever before. And the way I think you can get some of these great people is not get a commitment of 2, 3, 5 years, get a commitment of like a tour of duty. Like, hey, you come in here for a period of time and you crush it for a year or two, then you help us hire your replacement, a superstar just like you, and then you can catapult back into some big corporate job if that's where you want to go, or you're going to be drinking the Kool-Aid and say, "It's what I want to do for the rest of my life." Good friend of mine who was one of the CFOs at Electronic Arts, Brian Nider, went into basically second tour of duty nonprofit, helping people really do career pivots in the last phases of their lives, and also people with disabilities, and he's loving it. He's loving, and he's so well connected in his network of bringing in speakers, bringing in teachers, bringing in people to raise funds. I think there's a lot of people looking for something different who are waiting on the sidelines. We've also got a really interesting thing happening in America right now, which is more people over the age of 65 who are saying they're retired, but they're not drawing Social Security yet, suggesting they're waiting for something interesting to happen or be presented to them. So I would say, don't count yourself out. Like, swing big, go get some people, but sell a tour of duty. Don't sell, oh, you have to commit for a long time, because if it's new, they're going to hesitate to a long commitment. Get them to come in and taste it for a while, and then see if they really like it and they want to stay. That's what I think about. I think it's a great opportunity right now. In the chapter of my book, I talk about, especially people who are career pivoting. So another really interesting stat, more people are changing careers, not just jobs, than any time in history, right?
I've heard this, right? Exactly. Yeah.
So what's a good place? Let's say I'm in HR and I want to get into PR. I want to get into fundraising. Well, nonprofit would be a great place for me to go learn those traits. And so if you can supply a little bit of onboarding, a little bit of coaching, a little bit of mentoring, you can get some really phenomenal talent in there that has a really big network to help your organization.
Nice. I had another guest on this show not too long ago that talked about this really cool concept, and I wonder if you've run across it, because I feel like the way you're answering a lot of these questions, it'd be within your mindset of how to do this. But he talked about how, particularly with this younger generation coming through, not only are they just expecting right off the bat, this may be a short tenure, but because of that, they thought, let's make sure people coming onto your job site or you're coming onto your team, that you almost have a little bit of a reverse mentoring going on. In other words, there's mentoring that happens to them, of course, or for them, but these younger people, particularly when it comes to technology, AI tools, that they may just be more native to them. They could train some of the people that are in a nonprofit or a for-profit organization that maybe are in the C-suite, because sometimes generationally, the folks that are coming in that are younger just know it better and actually can train the people that are older than them. So there's this reverse mentoring happening. Are you seeing that? And the reason I ask it, because this gentleman who also is similar to you as a coach and consultant, what they're finding is when a younger person comes onto a job, if they have an opportunity in a sense to have an impact, not just in their role, but to actually train and have a kind of leave their mark on the C-suite, they stay longer because they see more of a purpose for them to be there, because now they're actually being honored for the gifts and the talents they have when it comes to AI or technology. Are you seeing things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I want you, hopefully the audience was paying attention to what you just riffed on, because that was just perfect. Yes, I'm seeing that, and particularly in the domain of understanding technology. I mean, just think about those of you who are sort of in that Gen Z zone, or in that zone of, I had to teach my parents how to use Zoom during the pandemic,
Okay,
Dad,
there you go.
your camera's off. There's a little icon lower left. And he goes,
Right,
icon,
exactly.
what's that? And so here's a generation that taught their teachers how to Zoom remotely. They taught their parents, their grandparents, they are so well equipped and versed into, digital fluency and AI fluency, that opportunity to reverse mentor, is phenomenal. And I think I 100% agree with you. That's very filling for them to be in a position where they can contribute, and it's probably going to make them want to stay longer, contribute more. You tap into that X factor of contribution. What Simon Sinek says, it's no longer a job, it's something bigger. I think it's pretty cool. I am seeing it a lot more. I saw actually a couple of articles this week I was reading about organizations doing more. Ericsson has been doing that a lot with their young talent with great results. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Note to those who are listening. Yeah. Start putting that into practice. I think that there was a brilliant idea and a brilliant concept. In fact, you're seeing it too, and you get to work with a lot of different organizations. I think there's a trend going on here, right? If you want that next generation, particularly Gen Z, to stay and really see this as more than just a job, that reverse mentoring is a great way to do that. Okay, so there's another big issue, and then particularly, I think it did land after COVID, was this return to the actual physical office. There's this big controversy, right? And the biggest well-known is with some of these large tech companies, right, of finally reversed some of their policies of, hey, you can work remote. Now you got to work, 50%. Now it's 100% back into the office, because proximity, there's something about proximity when it comes to a staff environment, a culture you're trying to build. But where do you find that balance? What have you seen with this, again, kind of of post-WorkQuake world we live in, do employers need to be a little bit more flexible, find a balance? Is it based on region, or what are you finding when it comes to remote work versus working in the physical office?
Yeah. Well, let's step back and talk about this from a real macro perspective. From biologists who study, biological creatures, have found, since they've been studying this, if you take a creature and you put it in a new environment for an extended period, COVID, the creature will no longer go back to doing things the way they did before. They'll build new patterns. They'll see new things that they didn't see before. Like, hey, I was never home when my kids came home from school. Holy smoke. That's a magic moment. I don't want to miss that anymore. Or, oh my gosh, my commute was my inner sanctum of peace. I don't have the commute anymore. I need the commute because that was my meditation, my preparation to go to work, and it was also me making sense of the day after. So many new things have happened that I think it's really shifted a lot of perspectives. The big rub for many large organizations is that we're centrally focused and then went remote and then said, hey, come back, is that a lot of the fear that was driving that decision was, hey, what does it mean to our culture if we're more dispersed? Like, I don't know how to lead a more physically dispersed team. And I don't know how to, feel confident that the teamwork is better or that the culture is better in a more remote world. And most of us were taught how to lead people in person, not remotely, right? And so that's been a big fear. And that's why you've seen a lot of this flip-flopping. My personal take is when people say which one's better, hybrid, remote, in person, I usually say yes. And they go, no. They go, oh, all of them? I go, yeah, you're going to have to experiment. Listen, I truly believe what the CEO, Aaron Levy, said of Airbnb. He said, listen, how can anyone believe that the best talent in the world for their company is within a 30-mile radius of their headquarters? Like, how can you possibly believe that? Like, it's impossible. So if you're in a business where we want to hire great people, you're likely to have a bigger pool to choose from if you're more flexible in what you offer. Next point, if you ask any executive recruiter, and I know a ton of them, hey, what's the first question candidates ask you when you give them a call about an opportunity? Can I do this job remotely? Okay. And I've had to broker like literally fights between middle management and senior management about this issue. Like an embarrassing, Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 50 companies. And I usually tell the people who want to stay home, and the people at the top, like, listen, you need to look at it from the other side's perspective. And what management's saying is, well, you're more productive when you're here. And people are saying, no, I'm way more productive when I'm home. But I think what employees are saying is, my life is more productive when I'm home, not just my job. My life is. I can go get a hairdresser appointment when I want to. I can shop off hours. I can commute to doctor appointments, against those, heavy congestion times. My life is more productive when I do it that way. Just think about it. Those of you who have kids, it's like some of these daycare centers close at 3:00. Like, who works at 3:00? Or some of these doctor's offices close. Like, what's going on here? I'm working. I can't go see you. I can't take time off. And so a lot of the COVID exposed how broken some stuff is. And so I still think we're in this making the sausage moment, and we need a little bit more time to figure this out. If I'm leading a company right now, I'm going to try to be as flexible as I can be. The one size fits all people strategy, I think, doesn't work anymore today. But we need more examples, right? Like, no company wants to be, well, we'll be the first ones to do this, massively. And I say, no, you can tell your employees, listen, we're going to try this work from home thing for a quarter. And then we're going to see how you like it, how the customers like it, how the board likes it, how the shareholders like it. And then we'll all reevaluate and we'll get smarter. And it may be something we continue. You may not want to continue. I do a lot of work in Europe. The homes in Europe are not as big as the homes in the US, generally speaking. People go there to sleep. They don't go there to live and binge watch shows for hours on end. I want to go outside, be with my friends in a cafe. And so our infrastructure is a little bit different than some other countries. So people, and sometimes people don't want to work at home. This is one of the really interesting trends that surprised me during the pandemic. Like, real estate market blows up during the pandemic. I'm like, wait a second, everyone should be economically sort of conservative right now. Like, why would you want to spend money? And then I talked to my realtor and I said, what's going on? She says, people are working from home. They need more space. I was like, oh, right. Like, it was such an obvious, I didn't get it. And she
Right?
explained
Sure.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
And a little bit more room, right? So they can all have their corner if they're on Zoom or whatever.
Right.
That makes total sense, actually. Yeah. Okay, well, for nonprofit organizations, boards are such critical pieces of the success of any nonprofit. It really is this board. So let's talk about boards real quick. When it comes to this post-WorkQuake world, what kind of questions should boards be asking their nonprofit leaders and their staff in order to really be competitive and to address address the issues we've been talking about? Are there some things you would recommend if you were to consult with the board on what they should be really doing with their current staff and nonprofit organizations where they serve on a board?
I mean, the first thing is, if you're hiring someone who's never been on a board before, a nonprofit board, better be clear about what your expectations are. The nonprofit boards that I've been a part of, there's an expectation. If you're on the board, you're raising money for us, okay? Some people don't like that. And so I would be really explicit around, here's what we're expecting, okay? Before I start looking and say who might fit that profile really well. I want to be looking for someone who's got a really big network, who's really well networked. I'd want to be looking for someone who fills a niche that I don't have, okay? Who fills I don't know, whether it's fundraising, whether it's some domain expertise that I'm looking for, whether we're going to have some big real estate issues coming up in I need someone who's a real estate expert, or we see some big legal contract stuff coming down the pipe. I want to get a lawyer or a law firm, to sort of sit on the board. So I think it kind of depends on the holes that you have. When I helped build the board at LinkedIn, we didn't have anyone that knew anything about subscriptions. So what do? We knock, who's there? Netflix. Yeah. Hey, you got someone that can help us out on our board? Yeah. Because you guys are world class, And so, I would look for that. And then I would also try to be explicit around what that person's going to get out of doing this. Okay. What the return is. And I would use as sort of exhibit a study that a Harvard professor did a number of years ago around joy and happiness and the components of that. Things are sorted at home, things are sorted professionally, and I'm giving back to the community. Okay. And that is a big empty hole for most executives.
Yeah.
Good
back. Point.
And, it's like, hey, look, it just so happens research finds out that people who are, giving back tend to have more full and fulfilled lives. And so I would use that as a big recruiting hook.
Okay. Well, there's so much here. Thank you so much. There's so many great insights you've shared with us. If my listeners want to get to know a little bit more about you or find out about your book, WorkQuake, where would you send them?
I would send them my website, stevecadigan.com. It's Cadigan, Cadigan. It's probably be in your show notes. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's something that you have a question this conversation generates, please reach out to me. I hear the LinkedIn thing's pretty good, so I use it a lot. But I'm pretty active on there. So if you have a question, I'll get back to you real quick. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, it is fascinating that because you did work at LinkedIn. I've just seen this. I mean, this is now, I'd say for a good solid 2 years, most of my colleagues would say they spend more time now on LinkedIn when it comes to social media for business related things than any other social media site because there's so much that happens there. So LinkedIn, whatever they've done, they've really moved the discussion when it comes to your business, anything professionally driven. It's not Facebook, it's not TikTok, it's really LinkedIn. It was what I found anyway. And again, that's across the board with almost all of my colleagues and friends. So interesting that you were a part of that with that massive growth and that mission of helping people find their dream job. I would say that worked really well because it seems like that now the results are showing. So
yeah, indeed. They've done a great job. I left the company 12 years ago. I still get reminded by anyone who wants, who thinks that I still work there of everything that's wrong with the site. So I appreciate
of course. Yeah.
I appreciate hearing some good things, Rob. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. I was going to say no company's perfect, but I do think that they've done a really good job with that piece anyway. So I don't know about the inner workings. Well, again, Steve, thanks so much for being on the show today. And for my listeners, there's going to be some great show note links. So make sure you click on those because this is a really interesting conversation. And if you're a leader of any organization and you're struggling with, number one, recruiting, particularly Gen Zers, but specifically retaining your staff, listen to this episode and go find out more what Steve is doing because this is something he's been doing for years. And again, Steve, thanks for being on the show today.
My pleasure.
Hey friends, well, I wanted you to know that this podcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to other podcasts. I also want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with others. This will actually help us get this great content out to more nonprofit leaders just like you. You can also join the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast community. Find other resources and interviews of past guests all on my website, nonprofitleadershippodcast.org. Well, thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep making your world better. This podcast is sponsored by DonorBox. DonorBox, helping you help others with the best donation forms in the business.